in the yeshiva Seder Pachad Yitzchak. Rav Hutner was Rosh Yeshiva in Chaim, Berlin for many years. He died in, I think, 1981 or 1980, if I recall correctly. And there's a very famous letter to a student of his who became went out to career. I don't remember exactly what career it was. And it's a letter written in Hebrew, but he uses English terms in the middle of the Hebrew letter to precisely pinpoint what he means to say. And he says that in our perspective, his understanding of the way things should be, when a person has a career, it's not considered to be, and it's a very important letter, very important to see, it's not considered to be a considers life to be a double life, which is he has one life, which kind of like what Moshe says. He has one life, which is the life in which he makes a living, and then he has another life, which is the spiritual life, where he actually is involved in all sorts of things which have to do with Avodas Hashem. But rather, says Rav Hutner, one is supposed to have a broad life, meaning that one's policies and one's attitudes and one's Avodas Hashem extend not just to the areas of learning or davening, but also extend equally and are all part of the same gestalt, the same whole, to one's career and one's work life. And he gives a mashal. He says there are some people who have two houses. They have a house in the city and a summer home. And there are other people who have houses which have several rooms in them. So one could read one's life as if one has two houses, right? Which is the way many people lead their lives. In other words, they have one house which is the Beis Medrash, and another house which is the work world. What?
Computer room.
Or what?
Computer room.
The computer room, or the room where the television is. And so those are their two houses, and so they live with those things which are as kind of a paradox. Whereas the person who has two rooms in the same house, they're all part of the same milieu, the same way of living, the same way of life. So Rav Hutner says, and the way he perceives a person's career is that a person's career has to be one in which it is a seamless continuation and inseparable from his Avodas Hashem in the Beis Medrash. This is not what Rav Moshe said yesterday. Rav Moshe clearly looks at parnasa as parnasa, a means of accomplishing sustenance, and therefore the bare minimum which is necessary in order to accomplish sustenance is what you should do, and no more if it can be avoided. Whereas according to Rav Hutner, it's not like that. A person's career is also an expression of his Avodas Hashem. It's interesting that Rav Dessler, in the first round of Milio, not a contradiction to Rav Dessler, we learned not setting up the BA program in Gateshead, but a very important Rav Dessler, named Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, he said that there's a Medrash, I think maybe it's a Zohar, which says about Hanoch. Hanoch was one of the people who appears in Parshas Bereishis, and it says Hanoch was a very holy kind of guy, and therefore he was taken to heaven, right? Just like Eliyahu Navi, he was taken alive to heaven when he was relatively young, at the age of 365, which back then was, considered to be like mere child. So the Gemara says, this Medrash says that Hanoch was a cobbler. Yeah, obviously he slipped through the yeshiva system, so he became a cobbler instead. And it says that Hanoch was mistakin minolim. He was fixing shoes, umiyachid yichudim, and he was unifying unifications. Now yichudim, unifications usually is taken as an esoteric Kabbalistic term, which has to do with thinking thoughts and meditating about the names of God while one is involved in one's, divine service, whether in davening, maybe in the middle of learning, in a time when a person takes their time to meditate. That's normally what Miyachid Yichudim means. But Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who was founded in the Muslim movement, says that's not what it means in this case. What it means here is that what is the yichud? A yichud means unity of heavens and earth. That can be done in a mystical way, unifying the heavens and earth with all sorts of Kabbalistic formulae, but it can also be done in a very pragmatic way. How is Hanoch unifying heavens and earth? When he made a shoe, he made a shoe with the intent that that this shoe should be the very best possible shoe, the very best shoe to walk in, the very most comfortable shoe, the shoe which should be the sturdiest and longest lasting, which could make for the benefit of his customer. By having that in mind when doing his work in and of itself was a manifestation of the connection of the divine with the mundane, being able to instill the idea of kedusha, meaning the idea of doing something for the right purpose, into the work which he was doing. That's what Rabbi Yisrael said. It's a very, very powerful message, which this message Rabbi Yisrael is putting into the Chanoch Miyachid Yichudim and Miyachid Yichudim. And I once saw an article, I believe it's in a paper called Elam Mekorot, which is translated to English as Return to the Source. And a fellow wrote an article, I think it's there, and Rav also speaks about it also in the first line Mitzvah Leo, how you can have two people. For example, I believe the example that Elam Mekorot chooses is you have two bakers. You have two bakers. By the way, I have to tell you, in New York, it's almost impossible to get good bread. I don't know if you're aware of that. But in Chicago, we had there was a chain called Breadsmith, which actually was franchised, and it had a good kosher franchise, and they made fantastic bread. So if anybody wants to open a franchise in Muncie, which I'm sure will be successful, this is a great idea. Get the franchise from Muncie for the Breadsmith and open it up, and that will be fantastic, because all the bread in Muncie they have a kosher? Yeah. So it's good. It's a great idea. Anyway, but theoretically, we're wanting to be able to get good bread. So they can have two bakers in the city. Two bakers who are baking that. Two bakers who both own breadsmiths. They're both baking identical, honey wheat bread. One of their good bread. They're both baking the same honey wheat or honey white bread, which is and tastes fantastic. It has a great crust. It has amazing sauce inside.
Rabbi, it's close to lunch. I think most of them are already hungry.
Right, I don't think I'm hungry. It is tantalizing and appealing, and everybody really wants to go and have as much as they possibly can of this bread.
Let's go.
One of these guys, it's a bit far to go to Chicago for lunch, but one of these guys is going straight to heaven, and the other guy was the identical thing. I don't know if he's going straight to hell, but he's not going to heaven as a result. Why? Because it's all a question of attitude. This is a very, very powerful idea. It's all a question of attitude. The first guy, Reuben, let's call him, when he bakes the bread which he bakes it with the intent of making the best possible product, which will taste the best, which will provide the best nutrients and nourishment, and which will make the person happy because he buys it in a beautiful store and it gets wonderful service, and therefore that person will be able to function on a much higher level and be much happier in his life because of his experience in breadsmith. And that was his idea into designing the breadsmith, to provide a customer with the best possible bread, and of course, if it's the best possible bread, he has to charge a significant price for it. There's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of expenses. And there's his own profit made in order to come home and feed his family. But his entire drive is to do chesed. Is to serve humanity in his baking bread. He just needs to have money in order to continue to do so. The other fellow, Shimon is our classic American capitalist. He frankly could not care less about what nutrition and what pleasure the customer gets. He really wants to provide that quality product because he knows quality products sell. And people enjoy buying good bread. And he can make more money selling good bread. And people enjoy coming into a good, appealing store and getting good service. And he can make money providing that service. So he's charging the same price in the same store for the same bread as the first guy. But the first guy's attitude is one of chesed. He's a giver. The second guy's attitude is one which doesn't entail any chesed at all. In fact, he's more of a taker than a giver. So the person has to bake bread. No matter what, there's got to be bakers in the world. So you can be a baker with the attitude of chesed, which is, like David HaMelech said, I think it's on left. The world will be built on chesed, or you could be a baker like the other guy, who's in it for the take, who wants to make the most money they possibly can in order to be able to live the best lifestyle they can, and it just happens to be figured out that if you sell quality products, you actually have a higher markup than if you sell non-quality products. Right? This, by the way, is the second approach. As I said, is the basis of American capitalism, which is why American capitalism is not an optimal Torah system. Because the idea of American capitalism is based on the assumption that if you build a better mousetrap, you will make more money. Not if you build a better mousetrap, then you will help your customer catch more mice. So therefore, it's not based on the premise of chesed, but on the premise of more efficient making of money. But so to say, the same two people, with their careers, one of their careers is incidental to their Avodas Hashem, and maybe even detrimental to their Avodas Hashem, because they're there to make as much money as possible. Whereas the second fellow, on the contrary, he is there to do as much chesed with the world as possible, and it can be the same bread for the same price, but the first guy, his entire attitude is chesed, the other guy's entire attitude is trying to gain. As Rav Dexter makes a very interesting point in this respect. He says, for this reason, it's a questionable point, but it's a very interesting one. He says, for this reason, we find the Chazal works. I know this may come as a shock to you. Unlike us rabbis today who don't work, thank God, my father said that I have taken a very good, I have an advanced degree in work avoidance. So unlike us rabbis who don't work, back then the rabbis used to actually work, right? And they used to usually take menial jobs. They used to be ditch diggers, wood choppers, water carriers, and so on and so forth. So if that's that, I'm paraphrasing. He said, look, a ditch digger makes $10 an hour, right?
He does?
Assuming.
Oh.
He's
a good ditch digger.
Yeah, a lawyer a lousy lawyer makes $250 an hour, right? A good lawyer can make $600 an hour. So couldn't Chazal, they're pretty smart Chazal. We assume that they're pretty smart. So couldn't they, instead of becoming ditch diggers, couldn't they become lawyers or doctors or anything of that sort, which makes rocket scientists? Well, rocket scientists probably don't make that much money. But, what?
Not anymore. Computers do their work for them.
Yeah, so couldn't they do something which would make them much more money and much more efficiently?
Yeah.
So, what?
Not just thinking in less difficult in terms of
energy
and money.
Less expenditure, lower overhead. So you said, of course they could. But a person in this world has to be, as he puts it, a giver and not a taker. And it's remotely possible, but it's highly unlikely that if you have a lawyer which charges you, say, $600 an hour, which means $10 a minute, that whatever they're providing for you is that $10 a minute is actually worth the value of that $10. It's possible, but it's extremely unlikely, and you certainly have no way of knowing if the value of the good or the product or the service being delivered is higher in proportion to the investment which the buyer or person who's your client or patient is putting into this relationship. He says in terms of physical labor, it's much easier to tell how much I'm producing, and I can undercharge the person. I can say, you know what, I produced more than $10 worth today, and I'm not looking for overtime. I want to make sure that I'm a giver more than a taker. And I can quantitatively measure that. As opposed to a job which has to do with me using my mind, selling my brain, so to speak, I'm never going to be able to prove that actually I have given more return for the money that person has invested, so that in the sum total, I am a taker and not a giver. You see that? Yes. Okay. Okay. Does anybody disagree with that? Everybody's so quiet today. If you guys continue to be quiet, I'm just going to fall asleep.
Says you know.
I'm very good at that. I actually, if you listen to enough tapes, I have a lot of tapes on the internet. If you listen to my Yerushalmi tapes, there's 750 of them. So you'll see that you'll find enough of them in which I fall asleep in the middle of talking. It's a rare knack. Yeshiva Baruch requires this all the time. The knack of falling asleep while standing and the knack of falling asleep while talking. I can do both.
See, I did while standing before.
What?
I did while standing before. Doing slichot is painful, especially for a month.
So you can do it standing and you can actually do while you're talking. It's quite a little bit embarrassing when you fall asleep while you're talking. Because, first of all, everybody's kind of polite. They don't want to wake you up because you droop off. But besides that, sometimes as you're falling asleep while you're talking, you start speaking absolute gibberish. And then, when you kind of snap out of it, when you realize, uh-oh, what did I just say? And then you have to somehow try, and this is where Talmudic skills are very valuable, you have to somehow try and connect what you're saying in that state of gibberish to the material which you're trying to cover at the time. This is not not always possible, but one does make valiant attempts to do that. Anyway, so the idea that Rav Dessler was saying is a very, very powerful idea that a person has to make sure to take a profession, whatever it is, where there are more of its givers than there are takers. And it's more possible to make that assumption if you're doing a profession in which you're using your own hands to do work, or like whatever it is, or you're doing physical labor than one which you're not.
So what would be the sort of translation of this when you have so much of what is produced and consumed nowadays is insubstantial, is virtual, it has very relative significance and importance. And see, the status of someone who's a lawyer in a lot of lawyers, when I was at law school, for example, there were a lot of guys who, you could joke that they're carrying all their books like this because they were practicing for what they were going to do after they got out of law school, which is wait tables. So, and it's because there's so many of them, and it doesn't really say anything for someone to be a lawyer other than socially. It doesn't necessarily say something about, because the whole mechanism of the institution is what necessarily makes for the quote-unquote giving and taking, not necessarily the actual nature of the job itself. You're at a firm where in this thing you do is a lot, this role you take in the process of a contract being written for a company designates that you have this much money. Literally books discussing this kind of thing about what one, in terms of codes of conduct, what one should be doing and charging in terms of these things. It is designated by the profession that this service costs this much. Regardless of who you are as a person.
It's a good point. I don't have an answer to your question. You're making a statement more than making a point.
But I guess how I would rephrase it so as to be a question is how exactly would this translate to now, wherein there's so much that it's a matter of very fudgy.
It's a good question, and it's very hard to answer if there is any answer at all. But I can tell you, if you read my article on not to make you read my articles, but I suggest them very highly.
The rabbi doesn't fall asleep in writing, does he? Just a series of
sometimes
for a couple of hours.
That's the great thing about word processing.
Edit those out.
Edit those out, right?
You have like 2 pages of periods.
There was a fellow, Dr. Nathan Birnbaum, who was a famous Baal Tshuva of the early 20th century, who when he advocated that Jews should leave large cities and form farming communities, not just in Eretz Yisrael, but even in Chutz La'aretz.
What Amish, y'all?
It's not a bad idea. The Amish are pretty frum. Have you noticed that?
They're very frum, actually.
Amish.
So if that's the case, were they to do so, he said, then the agricultural or agrarian or rural lifestyle is much more suited for the ideal Torah form of life than metropolitan, cosmopolitan, city life, which is very difficult to square away with ideal Torah lifestyle.
Hamish.
Yes, it didn't actually work. People didn't actually make. He lived in Germany. In the 20s and 30s, they didn't actually start migrating back to the farm. But the idea.
We went there by the wagon load.
The idea is a very interesting idea that actually Judaism has a problem with life in the city, with conspicuous consumption and the competition for resources among the society. What?
Pol Pot had a problem with it as well.
Well, I don't think he said that we should move to Cambodia. I wasn't.
He wanted to have society become completely agrarian.
Agriculturalize the society.
Yeah. Also, we don't advocate killing people in order to accomplish. In order to accomplish that goal.
I wasn't just saying he also had this idea. I don't know.
Maybe you read Dr. Birnbaum's writing. That's how I figured it out. So ideally speaking, you're supposed to have a career in which you're going to be able not just to make a living, like Ramosha says, but according to the Chudner and that's where elsewhere, is one in which you can contribute in a meaningful way, which can be considered to be a chesed, as opposed to taking away from what society and and grandizing oneself.
Cultivating a spiritual, thing.
Cultivating spiritual aspects to your work.
Which should be one that cultivates the spiritual side of you and not simply...
Right. Which is a very hard thing to do, again, as I said, the entire American milieu militates against that type of attitude, because everything, not that communism is any better, communism is worse. Let me make that clear. This is not a plug for Marxism. But the American capitalistic society is based, especially if you're a Republican, is based on the assumption that people are only motivated by greed, and therefore, if we appeal to their greediness, then they will accomplish great things. If we're not allowed to appeal to their greed, so then they will not be able to accomplish great things because they'll have no motivation to do so. Okay, that is a problem. Okay. Not telling on the Democrats, but that is a problem. Okay, so that's in terms of Moshe from yesterday. Now, I want to go to a little bit of similar stuff from Rav Ovadia Yosef today. Equal time for this Friday.
Thank you for bringing forward the people out.
Sometimes it has to happen. Okay, again, I don't have enough copies of it, so a few people have to share.
No one wants it.
No one wants. Please, thanks. I feel very wanted
You
today.
don't need to read it, just follow it.
Just follow and not incoherently.
Rock back and forth.
Not silently. Okay. So this is very interesting shura. Ravadi has a couple of interesting shuras. This is one of them. And it says, Sheila, the question. If a child finished his studies in an elementary school, he finished the 8th grade, is it better to continue to learn in a yeshiva high school, where of course they teach secular studies, or and the kind of Mishnah of Chazal in order to fulfill Chazal's Mishnah and Sefta Avos? Yosef Talmud says Derech Eretz, that Torah is good when it is accompanied with the way of the world, or deep, or is it better Lamshich L'mo B'Yeshiva Kedosha, is it better to continue to learn in a holy yeshiva? Asher B'Kol Azman Mukta Shalim Torah, which to all of one's time is just devoted to learning Torah. Now, before you see Rav Ovadia's answer, you should know what it is. What do you think his answer is before we see it?
Something not burning in hell.
What? What do you think it is, no?
No.
No, you should go to high school, right? Isn't it obvious? Right. So, that's how we get there. It's not. Okay. Tshuva. Response. Shahir b'Kiddushin, learn the Kiddushin, of which we saw already yesterday. Amar Rabbi Noroi. Rabbi Noroi said, I forsake all crafts in the world. Only like teach my son Torah. It would seem the Divrei Rabbi Noroi, that the words of Rabbi Noroi, these words of Rabbi Noroi, they contradict the which we learn in Masechta Avos, the parent base, which the base. Rabbi Gamliel, V'nosha Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, Yosef Talmud Torah in Derech Eretz. We're supposed to have to learn Torah and have a trade. Too, because the toil in both of them cause the person's diminished capacity to sin. The Chol Torah also says, Chol Torah Sheim HaMalacha, any Torah which has no labor accompanying it, and this means physical labor, right? So it says, Seifa B'Tela, eventually the person is going to give up, Vivarer Savan, and it's going to come to sin as a result. Ubright to the Kiddushin, and the Bright says in the stuff of the Kiddushin, look for a life with a woman you love. So that's the pasuk in Kohelet. So the word says, Emisha Mamishi, if it's going on a woman literally, so you should know just like a father has to marry off his son, so he has to teach him a trade. And if this Isha Sharata, this woman you love, is a metaphor For Torah, well, that's the Shem Shechayev Lulu Alam the Torah, Kachayev Lam the Umnus. Just like you have to teach Torah, you have to teach them also a trade. Rameir, it says, Kol Sheinu Melamed is no Umnus. Anybody doesn't teach his son a craft. Kilu Melam the list is as if it teaches him banditry. Peiros Rashi, and the Rashi says, Shechayev Ma'amal is Panes, he doesn't have from what to sustain himself. All you may do, he goes and robs other people. Ubebrachas Darish Bar Kapara and Brachas Bar Kapara says, Lolam Yilamid Olam no Umnus Kal Lakia first always teach his son a craft which is light and clean. The Chenamun Soter said, Godol Anenem Yigiyah Kal Yigiyah, greater somebody who enjoys the fruits of his own labor, Mirei Shamayim from somebody that's of heaven. Shema says, Yigiyah Katecha Kisochel. It says that if you the toil of your work you eat, Ashrecha, you're praiseworthy, but so long it's good for you. The suicide also says, the Shabbos, you can make a shidduch for your daughter on Shabbos, and also, the to teach your son Tanakh, or whatever Sefer is, Mishnayos, and you can also teach him a trade. At Shabbos, how can you teach him to be a carpenter on Shabbos? This is obviously not the practical part of carpentry, right? It's the theoretical part of carpentry. What? Ashkafa part of carpentry. So Peiros Rashi says, this is not part of the prohibition of dealing with your own stuff on Shabbos. Because it's a mitzvah to teach us on a craft. Shneimah says, look for life with the woman you love. Meaning, for in a craft, with which you can survive to give a Torah outcome, that's the end of the rush. But the situation looks grim. Looks like you got to go out to work, right? At least to look to study. Have no fear. Have no fear. Nevertheless, it seems that these things reach from Mashashina Babai to that which you learned in the Brisa. The Brisa says, this again we had this yesterday by Yishmon of Yishim by Yachal. But it says you should gather your grain. Matam Uloma, the second stanza of Shema. Matam Uloma, why does it say? Teach them, my God says, that this Torah should not desist from your mouth. Doesn't mean literally. No, it says you have to gather your grain. And hey, Mino Derech. Treat your grain with the custom of Derech means a harvest and planting. The Derech Shmuel is with her Shmuel. Peiros Rashi explains how Neighbor Mino Derech means conduct yourself with the way of the world. She'im Stark Brios, because when a person goes to beg and needs assistance, so then he won't deal with his work. Eventually he's going to stop learning Torah as well, because he's going to be too discombobulated to learn. Shimon says, extra other the possible person will harvest the time of harvest, the land is and he's going to plant the time planting, the question is Sila, and he's going to harvest time and harvesting, the Shadisha is going to thresh with time of threshing, the Zoyah is and he's going to winnow when there's wind. What's going to be with Torah? Who's going to learn? By the way, I think I told some of you. There's a famous one. Who knows? Such turnover. Maybe you heard it from me. Did I tell you the question? Does anybody remember the question of the Rambam in his introduction to Zroim? The Rambam in the introduction to Zroim says the world was created for the great intellectual giants. So he asked, why are the rest of the morons created? Okay? Why are you and I created? The numbskulls. What are we here for? The Rambam has two answers. Do you remember the two answers?
I forget.
One answer the Rambam gives is because even the great intellectuals have a need for human companionship. And therefore the rest of us are created for human companionship for the great scholars, otherwise it would be a very lonely place. They what? Yeah, right, but he has people did come in to see him, so therefore he has that fulfills him. The other reason is because, like Rabbi Shimon Chai says, if I have to do my own cleaning, sewing, purchasing, most of which I do have to do, but anyway, if I had, the old days before you had all these labor-saving devices, you have to do all this stuff yourself, and planting and harvesting, so when are you going to learn? The intellectuals never be able to be the intellectuals. So therefore, everybody else is okay in order to be the support staff of those people who are going to be the intellectuals. Okay, so those are the two reasons. So it's very similar to what is being said here, right? That Rav Shimon Chai says, if you got to do all that stuff, you're not going to have time to learn. So therefore, what do we have in this world in order to allow us to have time to learn?
Workers.
Non-Jews, right? So we have non-Jews who do the work for us in order we should be able to learn. That's Rav Shimon Chai's approach. That's not a mitzvah to work. It's just, a bummer which certain people have to do, and if they can avoid it, they should avoid it if they actually can.
So you fulfill that mitzvah, huh?
Right?
So you and I are fulfilling that mitzvah quite well.
The mitzvah of avoiding work?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have been doing it for much longer than you.
Yeah.
Okay, I am a true star at avoiding work. Okay, so
I'll take on as my mentor for that.
so there I said that when the Jews do the will of God, then the work is done by others. Shneimar says, foreigners will arrive to the road, and they will graze their sheep, and non-Jews will come. They're going to be farmers, and they're going to be the people who tend your vineyards. 1 second. Whenever we don't do the will of God, then then we have to do our own work. We don't have the goyim do it for us. Abaye said, many people did Rabbi Shmuel, and they collected their grain. Also the other, and it worked for them. Many people did it didn't work for them. Yeah.
Real quick, I remember it says like in the time of Mashiach.
When they say real quick, it means real slow.
Alright. And during the time of Mashiach, they said that it was written that all the Jews will have a permanent Shabbat, which means that all the Goyim are going to be doing all the work for us, right?
Might be taken literally.
Well, alright. Okay, what they say here is Jews shouldn't work, Jews should concentrate on Torah, let all the Goyim work, right? Don't fall asleep from me, Rabbi.
What's happening, see? Yeah.
Alright, so what about Bishul Israel, Pat Israel?
You see, you're Sephardi, so you have a problem with that. See, we Ashkenazi don't have a problem.
Yeah, all you have to do is light it.
Just wake up to start the fire.
Right. You aware of that difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardi? What?
Which can?
Bishul Yisrael. It's halacha that Jews have to cook food. You're not allowed to have a non-Jew cook, because I actually had this case.
No, you can just turn on the stove.
No. That's Ashkenazi. For him, we have to start and finish it. Yes.
They can't.
I agree with that.
But if they had a Sephardi Erev, maybe they'd be able to do it inside the Sephardi Erev. But
There's a heter with a business owned by a Jew.
what?
Ravadia has a heter with
Yeah.
a business owned by a Jew.
Okay.
Not a person that cooks.
It's a heter.
They say that the Soul Swanti used to smoke a pipe. And the reason he used to smoke a pipe is because he would go from bakery to bakery, and asking for a match to light the pipe, in order that he can then throw the match into the fire, in order that the bread should be pasi swell.
So Bishul Israel
I'll be sure you saw the same thing. This is why I have to tell you that inside. My grandfather, there's a myth about Europe. I've said the Soul Swanti Jews for a reason. My grandfather was a Rav in Switzerland. It's originally from Lithuania. He was in Warsaw in 1939, on the eve of the Second World War. That's before the war started. And he wrote a letter to his friends in the Telze in Lithuania. He said in restaurants, there are 40, in Warsaw there are 40 restaurants. There is only 2 kosher ones, Jewish-owned restaurants, 2 ones which are kosher, and only one of them is actually reliable. So can you imagine, people think that the Warsaw, like Muncie, right? There are dozens of kosher restaurants and kosher bakeries. The war had many from Jews. No, there's a big problem in Europe. So there were literally 38 of the 40 restaurants, 39 were places where we couldn't eat in Warsaw. So there's
40 were Jewish restaurants.
Yeah, Jewish restaurants. Yeah, Jewish restaurants where one couldn't eat. Yeah, like the kosher style. So therefore
What's kosher style?
anything with corned beef and pickles is kosher.
Right.
A lot of
It's only
sugar,
kosher delis that aren't kosher.
processed food,
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah, technically kosher pickles
What?
aren't kosher.
What?
Kosher pickles aren't kosher?
Most kosher pickles are kosher, actually.
No, it's just the style that they...
No, but they would get sued if they said kosher pickles and weren't really kosher, they have a problem. That's how it's a big deal to make kosher pickles, so they usually are kosher.
Louisiana had it.
But what was the problem?
What?
What was the problem with Warsaw? 40 restaurants, you said only 2 were kosher.
40 Jewish restaurants.
So 40 Jewish restaurants, 2 were kosher, 1 was reliable.
Only one of them was reliable.
What could be the problem? Meat?
Whatever it was. You know,
They kept having ham as a special
yeah, I
day.
know. There's a great story. Once it was one that's on the sidetrack here. Great story that there was. It was speaking of a restaurant. There was a Rav in Chicago many years ago. His name was Rabbi Goldman. Not many years ago. He lived a very long life. He was died in the 90s, well over the age of 100. Anyway, so his son became a conservative rabbi, and he got a smicha from Skokie Yeshiva, which at the time was still the Chicago Yeshiva in the west side of Chicago, the Hebrew Theological College. And the menahel of the yeshiva really didn't want to give him smicha. He really didn't want to give him smicha because he knew this guy shaved with a razor, which was, of course, forbidden by halacha, and he knew that, he probably would not end up frum.
Why did somebody shave this way?
In the 40s?
Oh, they didn't have a...
So he probably went through good the electric shavers back
It's
then.
not like before. There's a kosher way to do the same thing.
It's not because he's in Russia.
Sorry, Russia.
Yeah.
There's a kosher way to do the same thing. I understand like there is no kosher way to do it.
True. Okay. So he's in Russia. So you never met a Russian in your life?
Like Koshik's Koshik, he got sneakers, it's like a big deal. It's incredible.
No, it's not a big, incredible at all. America was a wasteland back then. So actually, eventually, he did become a conservative rabbi, and obviously there's many people who realized that would happen back then. He says later on in the book, first when he became a conservative rabbi, he wouldn't drive to shul on Shabbos. But one day he was walking to shul in the rain, it was really raining hard, and one of his congregants came by in his car and rolled down the window and said, "Enjoying your walk, Rabbi?" and drove on to shul. And for that day he decided, I'm also going to drive to shul on Shabbos. Anyway, so this guy back in the 40s, so he actually was, obviously they didn't want to do, the menahel didn't want to give the smicha, although ultimately he did get the smicha. So once the menahel saw him during the 9 days eating in a restaurant inflation, right? So making inflation in a restaurant during the 9 days. So the menahel was also in this restaurant. Now don't ask me what restaurants looked like back then. Obviously this is the Warsaw example, because the menahel came in and had ice cream. So obviously this is a restaurant you're serving on one side meat, on the other side milk. I don't know exactly how they came together. So he knew this rabbi, this soon-to-be Rabbi Goldman, knew, he's in trouble because the menahel saw him eating meat during the 9 days. So he went after he finished eating, after the menahel left. So he went up to the owner of the restaurant, whoever the owner of the restaurant was. He says, tell me what's in the ice cream. And it turns out that the ice cream was not kosher. Had gelatin in it, which is a big question. Halacha gelatin, yes, but let's assume it's not kosher. So the next day the menahel calls him into his office. Rabbi Greenberg was his name. He says, "Listen, Goldman, is it permissible to eat meat during the 9 days?" And Goldman says that to him, "Rabbi Greenberg, is it ever permissible to eat non-kosher ice cream?" And that's as a result, Rabbi Greenberg was not able to prevent him from getting smicha. Anyway, so how do we get that from Bishul? From Bishul.
What goyim am I going to be doing for Jews?
Oh, right. So goyim are doing Jews. Okay, so thank you. So I guess the goyim are not going to be doing the cooking, or somehow maybe Chazal at that time will reverse the prohibition on Bishul Afu and say that since goyim at that time will be more religious, in other words, they'll serve our God, so therefore perhaps the prohibition will no longer apply. Okay, so now then, so the Shimon Chai said that people, when Jews really serve Hashem, so then the goyim will do our work for them. Abai said, lots of people did Rav Shimon work, and some people did Rav Shimon Chai, and it didn't work, meaning they weren't able to let other people do their work for them. Rabbi Yochanan, it says, it's a long quote here. I'm sorry, there's a little plus line we're up to now in the second paragraph. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Shem Bechai. I feel what we say yesterday. I feel what call them El Kriya Shema Shachris Varvis. Even a person only read Shema in the morning and Shema in the evening. Kiyan is sustained by your Sefer Torah Zemipicha. You can sustain, how you said, the Torah should never be missing from your mouth. Shal ben Doma, it's a very famous Gemara. Shal ben Doma ben Achotish Rabbi Shmuel min Rabbi Shmuel. Ben Doma, the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel, asked Rabbi Shmuel, Kigoynani, something like me, Shalamadati Kol HaTorah Kula. I learned all the Torah. So, I learned everything there was to learn in the Torah. What is my halacha? Can I go out and learn Greek wisdom? So Rabbi Shmuel said, according to this Gemara, he said, he read, told him, says in this passage, the book of the Torah should never be missing from your mouth. You should be involved in thinking about it night, day and night. Go out and check. Find a day which is time which is neither day nor night, and that time you can learn Greek wisdom, right? Well, so the assumption Rav is making is that Greek wisdom here means any secular studies. And saying that, well, since it says it's supposed to be about day and night, so therefore, when can you learn Greek wisdom? Only when it's neither day nor night.
So those can dawn.
Right, I guess if you hold like Rabbeinu Tam and you have 72 minutes, so that gives you a long time to learn Chachma Yevani. But then, what?
I think you went to space. You don't know.
You guys are creative. I gotta hand it to you. Okay? How much are you getting? That's to go to Alaska for it. Okay. That's the university in Alaska. That's one of the truth. So it says the Gemara, it says the Ramavadia, Yaakov Shah, one of the commentaries asked, Shemikan Buchel Sharbi Yishmol Meto. It says at the beginning here that Rabbi Shmuel is lenient. On Parashat Pasuk, it says the Pasuk is Lo Yomush, that the Torah should not be missing from your mouth. Shadai Lo B'Kriyah Shema Shachar Tzarek, it's sufficient to read Shema in the morning and the evening. The Rabbi Shmuel Machmir, so then Rabbi Shimon is the one who's lenient, and he says that it's enough to read night and day, and Rabbi Shmuel is the one who's stringent. On Parashat Kiksova, and he says, no, you have to learn all day and all night, not just Shema in the morning and Shema in the evening, but all day and all night. Those mamish contradicts each other. Rabbi Shmuel Bracha said you're supposed to work, and here Rabbi Shmuel is saying you have to learn Torah all day and all night. And in Bracha, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, no, don't go out to work. And here he's saying all you have to do is learn Shema in the morning and Shema in the evening. That's his question.
So the one guy who says you have to learn Torah all day and all night, is he advocating that like everybody has to be a rabbi, or everybody has to like always? I mean, you couldn't even do anything else if you studied Torah all day and all night.
Good question. It seems though you're right.
Yeah.
It seems that what he's saying though, that in fact he's saying if you got to work, you got to work. But if once you're free for intellectual activity, then that intellectual activity has to be devoted to Torah.
Okay.
That's what the answer I think will be. Okay. So he said. So the Yaakov says, it's difficult. Again, we're reading inside. Rabbi Shmuel Machmir first events the Bracha is present. The Bracha says the opposite. Rabbi Shmuel Mer and Abraham Minhag Derech Eretz. It says he says you should be turned Derech Eretz. So closely drove with Sobas Banom to plow, plant, and harvest the right time. Shimachai Omer. Shimachai says no. Shalach said other people do the work. On Friday for Yomush compassion, he says you have to learn all day and all night. Also, whoever that is at. The eighth lawyer, Mimasha Kasa, the Peter of Yehuda, and Ravadi says we can bring a point here, a noteworthy point, in the Tosfos of Yehuda, which is one of the Sfarim HaBrachos. And Shilchai Omer V'chulei, why he says not because that Rabbi Shimon holds it's not an obligation to learn day and night. It's not required. Because the Rabbi Shimon says he says that even if you only read Shema in the morning and evening, it fulfills what you have to do. And the mitzvah just saying it's a mitzvah to do it in order not to be mavakal Torah. Not that you have to learn Torah, but you shouldn't be
forsaking.
Thank you, good word. You shouldn't be forsaking Torah. So that's why he said it. That's a good word. Okay, the Chen comes to say the Rosh Hashanah. And that says the Rosh also writes a similar thing. So then Rav brings down here in the parentheses, Vayin over Ran Nedorim, Chesam Alf, the Ran, the Rabbi Nissim, one of the Rishonim, right? Shekased writes nearly dropped after the mitzvah of Kriyash Shema Shachris harvest. He says a different shot. He says Kriyash Shema Shachris in the morning is not a sufficient. It says that Vishinatam Levanecha. We say the Shema should give a term mechudadim v'picha. That divrei Torah should be sharp in your mouth. If a person asks you questions, or something, don't mumble and answer him, but rather answer him forthright. And boy, they say Shema night and day, then how can you answer a person forthright? Now you clearly see from this case that the Ram was not a chassid. But the Ram was a chassid, he would say, of course, say Shema in the evening, in the morning, any question you ask is answered, right? Because Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's the answer to all questions. But the Ran didn't hold that way. The Ran obviously held, the Ran held obviously that you have to give an intellectual, sophisticated answer to every question, not just the answer that Hashem Echad. I see that. What? Okay.
Who was on?
Rabbeinu was a 14th, 15th century medieval authority. Okay. So he says, therefore it says, therefore each person is learn Torah day and night as much as he can. Ryan should do a bad Torah. Rabbi Shmuel, and the question, Rabbi Shmuel, skipping the practice here, one could say, Rabbi Shmuel, you can rack the Torah Parnassus, as I answered you before. Rabbi Shmuel only allowed his work for the purpose of making a living. But to learn Greek wisdom, so Torah Parnassus is not necessary for a Parnassus low. Perhaps he didn't allow that. However, Yerushalmi asked this question explicitly. Esau said, show us Rabbi Shua, they asked Rabbi Yoshua, not Rabbi Shmuel, asked Rabbi Shua, can a person teach his son Greek wisdom? So he said to them, similar as we've seen in the Bible, you should learn at time, which is neither day or night. It says you have to learn day and night. But Tani, and there Yerushalmi itself asked, didn't we learn? Rabbi Shmuel says, you have to choose life. What does it mean choose life? Zu umnus, you have to have a craft. And you say I'm going to learn day and night, also real Rami b'no umnus. You should never be able to teach your son a craft. We're up to the second page. Beginning of see because it says, Vagisba Yom Malai says learn Torah 9 days. Rabbi Yechanan said, the reason why you're not allowed to teach Chachmi Avanis is Mipnei Mitzvah. Because people will come to, sorry, it's a hard word to translate. People will come to be informers to the government. Chachmi Avanis, according to one opinion in the Gemara, was not actually Greek wisdom, but it was this kind of code language, a secret language. It wasn't even real Greek. It's like, pig Greek, whatever it was. So the people would want to speak to each other in a secret way, which nobody else would understand. They'd speak or communicate in Chachmei Avanis. So therefore, Chachmei Avanis was a very narrow prohibition, specifically made on teaching people this type of means of communication, because it could potentially lead to devastating results. Right? Nimsa. So therefore, it really has nothing to do with the contradictions of the Torah. No, of course we're allowed to learn Greek wisdom according to this. Now we're allowed to learn that specific Greek wisdom, which is called, that specific language or communication, which is called Greek wisdom. But other things you're allowed to learn. Okay, Lamaisa, I think we're going to have to stop here. We're going to come back to this meeting on Monday.